They say that in war, appearances can be deceiving. An aircraft that looked like a civilian transport on the ground with rounded lines and the profile of a passenger plane could hide a hunger for combat. When the Lockheed Hudson began crossing the Pacific, many Japanese pilots simply dismissed it. Another light Allied aircraft, they thought, not a serious threat. But that first impression would be shattered by reality. What Japan eventually thought of the Hudson was not simple contempt or panic. It was a slow, stubborn evolution towards respect, surprise, and, at times, a quiet, lingering frustration. The Hudson was born from a practical idea. Take the agile fuselage of the Lockheed Model 14 Super Electra and turn it into an economical, quick-to-produce military aircraft. It was a twin-engine design with civilian origins that, once fitted with robust radial engines, radio equipment, and mounts for machine guns and bombs, became a patrol, reconnaissance, and light attack aircraft. That mixture, an almost civilian frame with the teeth of war, earned it the nickname the passenger plane with bite. And it was precisely that appearance that became its greatest early weapon. Many Japanese pilots underestimated it because in their minds a true predator simply didn't look like that. But war teaches fast. The Hudson proved itself adaptable. It patrolled long routes in search of convoys, launched precision attacks on ships, carried out low-level reconnaissance, and, in the hands of determined crews, could maneuver enough to fight off enemy fighters. It wasn't the fastest fighter nor the most heavily protected bomber, but it had range, endurance, and one strategic advantage that hurt Japan deeply. It appeared where it wasn't expected. Daring night flights, dawn sorties, patrols that turned into sudden strikes, all of these revealed a versatility that unsettled Japanese defenders. For Japanese officers, the main concern wasn't the aircraft's looks, but its persistence. The twin-engine configuration gave the Hudson the ability to fly far and withstand damage that would have brought other light aircraft down. It could lose a propeller and continue flying. It could take hits in non-critical areas and still return home. That ability to come back, to survive encounters that should have been fatal, forced intelligence analysts to rethink their assessment. Reports that once labelled it merely as enemy transport began to include a far more troubling note: offensive patrol, possible attack. The Hudson's armament was modest on paper, a handful of machine guns and capacity for small bombs or depth charges, but its real strength lay in how it was used. Both Japanese and Allied forces saw how those ordnance loads, when aimed at lightly defended vessels or supply points, produced disproportionate damage. In the Pacific, where logistics were life itself, sinking a small tanker, damaging a supply ship, or destroying a coastal depot could have strategic consequences. The Hudson, with well-placed bombs and swift attacks, became a precision knife, striking exactly where it hurt. Air encounters added another layer to the lesson. At first, Japanese pilots treated the Hudson as a minor target, attacking with the confidence that their maneuverability and firepower guaranteed an easy kill. But soon there were accounts of skirmishes where the Hudson, with pilot and co-pilot working in unison, held its own, returned fire from stable positions, and maneuvered with enough grit to escape. It wasn't a graceful dogfight. It was a struggle for survival, absorbing punishment and conserving energy. Watching a Hudson limp back to base, riddled with holes yet still flying, forced Japanese airmen to reconsider their opinion of that little transport. Japanese intelligence also began to notice troubling patterns. Hudsons weren't just attacking ships, they were closing surveillance gaps, intercepting landings and acting as airborne eyes for entire fleets. A Hudson that spotted a convoy could transmit coordinates that triggered larger coordinated attacks. In that sense, its value as a reconnaissance aircraft was possibly more worrying than its value as a bomber. Detect first, report quickly, disappear. That was the essence of its effectiveness, and Japan learned to fear it. On the ground, morale suffered. Accounts from Japanese personnel speak of the unease provoked by those silhouettes appearing over the horizon at dawn, the metallic hum of twin radial engines, and the uncertainty over whether the familiar profile carried bombs or merely eyes. On occasion, the mere presence of Hudsons forced crews to disperse equipment, hide supplies, or reorganize transport routes, logistical costs that, over time, added up to more than any single tactical loss. Garrisons came to see the Hudson as a form of constant pressure, not just an isolated attacker, but an instrument for grinding down their ability to sustain distant operations. Not every encounter was heroic for the Hudson. It suffered losses, and in some cases fell victim to Japanese ambushes or superior numbers. But the most telling episodes were those in which a damaged Hudson didn't plunge into the sea, but instead managed to return with valuable evidence of the encounter: photographs, coordinates, traces of enemy fire that later became usable intelligence. That resilience turned the aircraft into an active witness in the war, rather than a simple casualty. From a technological perspective, Japanese analysts couldn't ignore the efficiency of its twin-engine layout, its basic avionics, and the crew-friendly ergonomics. Japan, despite producing excellent light aircraft and agile fighters, often lacked the logistical infrastructure to support long maritime patrols on the scale that Hudsons routinely conducted. Seeing a Hudson operate from forward bases, cover hundreds of miles, and remain operational for hours demonstrated that Allied air power projection in the Pacific was more than numbers. It was a strategic advantage. The Japanese response evolved from surprise to adaptation. Defensive strategies such as improved coastal patrols, harder protection of key points, and prioritizing supply line defense began to take shape. Ambush tactics with fighters, layered anti-aircraft fire, and innovations in camouflage and dispersal were implemented. None of these measures eliminated the Hudson's threat, but they did mitigate its impact in some areas. Still, the strategic damage was already done. The Hudson's presence forced Japan to disperse resources that, under different circumstances, could have been sent to more critical fronts. Perhaps the most interesting outcome, and the least discussed, is how the Hudson entered Japanese operational folklore as a small beast that should never be underestimated. It wasn't a zero-provoking awe through agility. It wasn't a heavy bomber demanding massive defensive efforts. It was something else. An irritating, persistent adversary capable of delivering sharp, targeted blows. And in the Pacific War, where every ton of fuel, every week of supplies, and every transport count mattered, irritation quickly turned into strategic discomfort. When the war ended and archives were opened, Japanese reports, no longer constrained by wartime urgency, offered an honest assessment. The Hudson was a minor player in terms of raw firepower, but a major one in terms of cumulative impact. Its role as lookout, attack coordinator, and opportunistic striker left a disproportionately deep mark in the campaigns where it operated. For later Japanese historians, the Hudson represented a clear lesson: never underestimate what appears modest when it is used intelligently. If I had to condense Japan's perception of the Hudson into a single image, it would be this: an aircraft profile that first appeared harmless at dawn, yet could instantly disrupt plans, reveal positions, and vanish again. It was the small one that bit and fled. That is why, when Japanese veterans speak of the Hudson today, their voices mix irony with respect. They remember that in war, appearances deceive, and that the cold efficiency of a machine can be more dangerous than the showy violence of a larger weapon. In the end, the truth is twofold. The Hudson was neither the most famous nor the deadliest aircraft of the conflict. But it was, without doubt, one of the most effective in practical terms. Its crews knew it. Its enemies learned it the hard way. And that evolution in perception, from dismissal to restrained respect, is itself a lesson in history. War reshapes what we think of machines, and what we think of machines reshapes war.